Intellectual. All right. So, welcome everyone. My name is Uma, and I just really love to read. I'm a little bit of a nerd. So, I have a book. Hey, baby girl, welcome. I read like about a book a month, and this particular book I read every single year because it has helped me stay in a mindset of wealth and not be in a mindset of poverty. So the book that I'm reading tonight is Think and Grow Rich. Okay. And basically, this book was written by Napoleon Hill in March 1937. And you would think it was written a long time ago. It might be outdated, but this is one of the books that is timeless because the concepts that they talk about in this book can still be used today. And that's why I feel like when I read this every year, it just kind of adds to my abundance mindset. Okay. So Napoleon Hill did a thing where he interviewed 500 of the wealthiest men in America. And he was able to pick up 13 principles from them that help them gain a mindset of abundance that also created the wealth that they had. He interviewed people like Henry Ford of Ford Motors, Thomas Edison, because this was who was alive back then in the day, right? So Think and Grow Rich is a very important book. Tonight, we're only reading chapter 1. If you guys like this, and I'm talking to the people on my live stream, but if you guys like this, I will be, for the next 2 weeks, I'll be reading a chapter a day every morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I will be in my room, reading. Now, if you miss a day or you can't get to my morning stream, come to my YouTube channel. That's where I'm streaming right now. My YouTube channel is www.youtube.com/the-lotus-and-the-light. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about it. When I do a read, I like to ask questions. I hope some of you in this room are still going to be here for the whole chapter and that you can comment. So if I can just get everybody in the room to just put a 1 in the comments, let me see who's still here. I know people sometimes pop in and pop out. Thank you. Thank you, baby, for being in here. Jolex, thank you for hanging out with me today. So let's get to it. All right, so we're going to first start. Thank you, Self Divine. Thank you for being here. Take my nap for work. Yes, not a problem, Prez baby girl. And like I said, it's going to be on my YouTube channel. So, definitely check it out there if you want to. All right. Okay, chapter 1, the man who thought his way into partnership with Thomas A. Edison. We miss you too, love. Truly, thoughts are things, and powerful things at that. When they're mixed with definiteness of purpose, persistence, and a burning desire for their translation into riches or other material objects. A little more than 30 years ago, Edwin C. Barnes discovered how true it is that men really do think and grow rich. His discovery did not come about at one sitting. It came little by little, beginning with a burning desire to become a business associate of the great Edison. One of the chief characteristics of Barnes' desire was that it was definite. He wanted to work with Thomas Edison, not for him. Observe carefully the description of how he went about translating his desire into reality, and you will have a better understanding of the 13 principles which lead to riches. Hi, Emran, Southside, Caramel, Luvaloli. Okay, and Zane. So I want you guys to understand this book was written in 1937. They're talking about this guy, Edwin Barnes, who really wanted to work with, not work for Thomas Edison. Now, back in that day, Thomas Edison was like a superstar, right? He was an inventor. He was making a lot of things. He created the light bulb. So basically, he was like a rock star. And here's this guy who has no ties to Edison, who just wants to work with him as a partner, not for him. How did he make that happen? That's what we're going to go into. Okay. When this desire or impulse of thought first flashed in his mind, he was in no position to act upon it. Two difficulties stood in his way. He did not know Mr. Edison, and he did not have enough money to pay his railroad fare to Orange, New Jersey. These difficulties were sufficient to have discouraged the majority of men from making any attempt to carry out the desire. I mean, how many of us would have given up? Oh, I want to meet Jay-Z, but I don't know him and I don't know how to get there. So I'm going to give up on it, right? But his was no ordinary desire. He was so determined to find a way to carry out his desire that he finally decided to travel by blind baggage. Do you guys know what that means? Blind baggage means he just jumped on a freight train heading to East Orange. That's how desperate he was to meet Thomas Edison. He presented himself at Mr. Edison's laboratory and announced he had come to go into business with the inventor. In speaking of the first meeting between Barnes and Edison, years later, Mr. Edison said, "He stood there before me, looking like an ordinary tramp. But there was something in the expression of his face which conveyed the impression that he was determined to get what he came after. I had learned from years of experience with men that when a man really desires a thing so deeply that he's willing to stake his entire future on a single turn of the wheel to get it, he is sure to win. I gave him the opportunity he asked for because I saw he had made up his mind to stand by until he succeeded. Subsequent events proved that no mistake was made." So Mr. Edison, Thomas Edison, actually gave him a chance. Now imagine this guy, took a freight train to go see Thomas Edison. He shows up, he's all shabby and dusty. His clothes are not even like expensive. And he walks into Mr. Edison's laboratory and says, I don't even want to work for you. I want to be your partner, right? That takes some guts. And Mr. Edison recognized it. Just what young Barnes said to Mr. Edison on that occasion was far less important than that which he thought. Edison himself said so. It could not have been the young man's appearance which got him his start in the office, for that was definitely against him. It was what he thought that counted. If the significance of this statement could be conveyed to every person who reads it, there would be no need for the remainder of the book. And the statement is, it was what he thought that counted. Barnes did not get his partnership with Edison on his first interview. He did get a chance to work in the offices at a very nominal wage, doing work that was unimportant to Edison, but most important to Barnes because it gave him an opportunity to display his merchandise where his intended partner could see it. So think about that. This guy really wants to meet the inventor, Thomas Edison. He wants to work with him, not for him. So he shows up to Thomas Edison's office, asks for a job to be with him. Thomas Edison recognizes that this man is confident and he's going places. I'm going to put him in my office to do non-important work. How many of us would turn up our nose at that and say, oh, no, I'm too good for that. I'm too good to be an office boy. But Barnes didn't. Do you understand? He took the opportunity. Months went by. Apparently, nothing happened to bring the coveted goal which Barnes had set up in his mind as his definite purpose. But something important was happening in Barnes' mind. He was constantly intensifying his desire to become the business associate of Edison. Psychologists have correctly said that when one is truly ready for a thing, it puts in its appearance. Barnes was ready for a business association with Edison. Moreover, he was determined to remain ready until he got that which he was seeking. He did not say to himself, well, what's the use? I guess I'll change my mind and try for a salesman job. What he said was, I came here to go into business with Edison, and I'll accomplish this even if it takes the remainder of my life. He meant it. What a different story men would have to tell if only they would adopt a definite purpose and stand by that purpose until it had time to become an all-consuming obsession. Maybe young Barnes did not know it at the time, but his bulldog determination, his persistence in standing back of a single desire was destined to mow down all opposition and bring him the opportunity he was seeking. When the opportunity came, it appeared in a different form and from a different direction than Barnes expected. That's one, I told you, that's one of the tricks of opportunity. It has a sly habit of slipping in by the back door, and often it comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. Perhaps this is why so many fail to recognize opportunity. Mr. Edison had just perfected a new office device. Yes, Rosé. Known at that time as the Edison dictating machine, now the Ediphone. His salesmen were not enthusiastic over the machine. They did not believe it could be sold. Barnes saw his opportunity. It crawled in quietly, hidden in a queer-looking machine, which interested no one but Mr. Thomas Edison and Barnes. Barnes knew he could sell the Edison dictating machine. He suggested it to Edison and promptly got his chance. He sold a machine. In fact, he sold it so successfully that Edison gave him a contract to distribute and market it all over the nation. Out of that business came the slogan, made by Edison and installed by Barnes. The business alliance has been in operation for more than 30 years. Now remember, this was back in 1937. Out of it, Barnes has made himself rich in money, but he has done something infinitely greater. He has proved that one really may think and grow rich. How much actual cash that original desire of Barnes has been worth to him, I have no way of knowing. Perhaps it brought him $2 or $3 million. But the amount, whatever it is, becomes insignificant when compared with the greater asset he acquired in the form of definite knowledge that an intangible impulse of thought can be transmuted into a physical counterpart by the application of known principles. Barnes literally thought himself into a partnership with the great Thomas Edison. He thought himself into a fortune. He had nothing to start with except the capacity to know what he wanted and the determination to stand by that desire until he realized it. He had no money to begin with. He had no education. He had no influence, but he did have faith, initiative, and the will to win. With these intangible forces, he made himself number one man with the greatest inventor who ever lived. Now, let us look at a different situation and study a man who had plenty of tangible evidence and riches, but lost it because he stopped literally 3 feet short of the goal he was seeking. Before I move on to that, what do you guys think of that story about Edward C. Barnes and Thomas Edison? How many of you can relate to this story of having that kind of determination? Have you had that kind of determination in life? And if you have, did it work out for you? Or have you seen times in your life when you didn't have that determination and it didn't work out? You liked it? You liked the story? It depends. Yeah, it depends on situations. All right, let's listen to the second story. One of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. Compassion can be easy, but yes, that's a very good point, Self-Divine. Okay, P. Brandon. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. An uncle of R.U. Darby was caught by the gold fever in the gold rush days and went west to dig and grow rich. He had never heard that more gold has been mined from the brains of men than has ever been taken from the earth. That's a saying. He staked a claim and went to work with pick and shovel. The going was hard, but his lust for gold was definite. After weeks of labor, he was rewarded by the discovery of the shining ore. He needed machinery to bring the ore to surface. Quietly, he covered up the mine, retraced his footsteps to his home in Williamsburg, Maryland. Thank you for stopping in. Told his relatives and a few neighbors of the strike. They got together money for the needed machinery and had it shipped. The uncle and Darby went back to work the mine. The first car of ore was mined and shipped to a smelter. The returns proved they had one of the richest mines in Colorado. A few more cars of that ore would clear all debt. Then would come the big payout in profits. Down went the drills. Up went the hopes of Darby and Uncle. Then something happened. The vein of gold ore disappeared. They had come to the end of the rainbow and the pot of gold was no longer there. They drilled on, desperate, trying to pick up the vein again, all to no avail. Finally, they decided to quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man for a few $100s and took the train back home. Some junk men are dumb, but not this one. He called in a mining engineer to look at the mine and do a little calculating. The engineer advised that the project had failed because the owners were not familiar with fault lines. His calculation showed that the vein would be found just 3 feet from where the Darbys had stopped drilling. That is exactly where it was found. The junk man took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. Most of the money which went into the machinery was procured through the efforts of R.U. Darby, who was then a very young man. The money came from his relatives and neighbors because of their faith in him. He paid back every dollar of it, although it was years in him doing so. Long afterward, Mr. Darby recouped his loss many times over when he made the discovery that desire can be transmuted into gold. The discovery came after he went into the business of selling life insurance. Remembering that he lost a huge fortune because he stopped 3 feet from gold, Darby profited by the experience in his chosen work, by the simple method of saying to himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because men say no when I ask them to buy health insurance. Darby is one of a small group of fewer than 50 men who sell more than $1 million, in life insurance annually. He owes his stickability to the lesson he learned from his quitability in the gold mining business. Before success comes in any man's life, he is sure to meet with much temporary defeat and perhaps some failure. When defeat overtakes a man, the easiest thing to do is to quit. That is exactly what the majority of men do. More than 500 of the most successful men in this country has ever known told the author their greatest success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had taken them. Failure is a trickster with a keen sense of irony and cunning. It takes great delight in tripping one when success is almost within reach. So think about that. R.U. Darby lost millions in gold mining because he literally stopped physically 3 feet from the gold ore. But did he allow that defeat to taint him? No, he didn't. What he did was he went into another business, life insurance, and because of his past failure, he used it in life insurance. So when any man told him no, He didn't stop because he remembered when he stopped and he missed out on millions. Right, something like that. For fuel. Exactly. He used his failures as a fuel to give him his riches. Here's another lesson, a 50-cent lesson in persistence. Now, for this lesson, I have to remind you all that this book was written in 1937. So they don't use words like females. Everybody is male in here. They say men in here. They refer to people of color as colored people. So don't pay attention to all that. It's an old book. Just keep the concepts as we keep going. All right, here we go. Shortly after Mr. Darby received his degree from the School of Hard Knocks and had decided to profit by his experience in the gold mining business, he had the good fortune to be present on an occasion that proved to him that no does not necessarily mean no. One afternoon, he was helping his uncle grind wheat in an old-fashioned mill. The uncle operated a large farm on which a number of colored sharecrop farmers lived. Quietly, the door was opened, and a small colored child, the daughter of a tenant, walked in and took her place near the door. The uncle looked up, saw the child, and barked at her roughly. "What do you want?" Meekly, the child replied, "My mommy say send her 50 cents. "I won't do it," the uncle retorted. "Now you run off home." "I'll not do it." "Yes, sir," the child said, but she did not move. The uncle went ahead with his work, so busily engaged that he forgot about the child. When he looked up and saw her still standing there, he yelled at her. "I told you to go home. Now go, or I'll take a switch to you." The little girl said, "Yes, sir," but she did not budge an inch. The uncle dropped a sack of grain he was about to pour into the mill hopper, picked up a switch, and started toward the child with an expression on his face that indicated trouble. Darby held his breath. He was certain he was about to witness a murder. He knew his uncle had a fierce temper. He knew that colored children were not supposed to defy white people in that part of the country. When the uncle reached the spot where the child was standing, she quickly stepped forward, one step, looked up into his eyes, and screamed at the top of her lungs, "My mama said she gotta have that 50 cents. The uncle stopped, looked at her for a minute, slowly laid the switch on the floor, put his hand in his pocket, and took out the 50 cents and gave her. The child took the money and slowly backed out the door, never taking her eyes off the man who she had just conquered. After she had gone, the uncle sat on a box and looked out the window into space for more than 10 minutes. He was pondering with awe over the whipping he had just taken. Mr. Darby, too, was doing some thinking. That was the first time in all of his experience he had seen a colored child deliberately master an adult white person. How did she do it? What happened to his uncle that caused him to lose his fierceness and become as docile as a lamb? What strange power did this child use that made her master over her superior? These and other similar questions flashed into Darby's mind, but he did not find the answer until years later when he told me the story. Strangely, the story of this unusual experience was told to the author in the old mill, on the very spot where the uncle took his whipping. Strangely, too, I had devoted nearly a quarter of a century to the study of the power which enables an ignorant, illiterate colored child to conquer an intelligent man. As we stood there in the musty old mill, Mr. Darby repeated the story of the unusual conquest and finished by asking, "What do you make of it? What strange power did that child use that so completely whipped my uncle?" The answer to his question will be found in the principles described in this book. Keep your mind alert, and you will observe exactly what strange power came to the rescue of the child. You will catch a glimpse of the power in the next chapter. Somewhere in the book, you will find an idea that will quicken your receptive powers and place at your command for your own benefit this same irresistible power. The awareness of this power may come to you in the first chapter, or it may flash into your mind in some other chapter. It may come in the form of a single idea, or it may come in the nature of a plan. Again, it may cause you to go back into your past experiences of failure or defeat and bring to the surface some lesson by which you can regain all that you lost through defeat. So, how many of you, as I'm reading, are starting to have these ideas pop into your head about your own life or your own ideas for expansion in your life? Just put a 1 in the comments if any of that is already beginning to happen to you. That's what he's talking about. After I had described to Mr. Darby the power unwittingly used by the little colored child, he quickly retraced his 30 years of experience as a life insurance salesman and frankly acknowledged that his success in the field was due in no small degree to the lessons he learned from that child. Mr. Darby pointed out, every time a prospect tried to bow me out without buying, I saw that child standing there in the old mill, her big eyes glaring in defiance. And I said to myself, I gotta make this sale. The better portion of all sales I've made were made after people told me no. He recalled too his mistake in having stopped only 3 feet from gold, but he said that experience was a blessing in disguise. It taught me to keep on keeping on no matter how hard the going may be. A lesson I needed to learn before I could succeed in anything. This story of Mr. Darby and his uncle, the colored child and the gold mine, doubtless will be read by hundreds of men who make their living by selling life insurance. And to all of these, the author wishes to offer the suggestion that Darby owes to these 2 experiences his ability to sell more than $1 million of life insurance every year. Life is strange and often imponderable. Both the success and failures have their roots in simple experiences. Mr. Darby's experiences were commonplace and simple enough, yet they held the answer to his destiny in life. Therefore, they were as important to him as life itself. He profited by these 2 dramatic experiences because he analyzed them and found the lesson they taught. How many of you go through life and you don't analyze what happens in life? Or do you sit there and analyze what happens in life? Okay? But what of the man who has neither the time nor the inclination to study failure in search of knowledge that may lead to success? Where and how is he to learn the art of converting defeat into stepping stones to opportunity? In answer to these questions, this book was written. That's good. The answer called for a description of 13 principles. But remember, as you read, the answer you may be seeking to the questions which have caused you to ponder over the strangeness of life may be found in your own mind through some idea or plan which may spring into your mind as you continue to read this book. One sound idea is all you need to achieve success. The principles described in this book contain the best and most practical of all that is known concerning ways and means of creating useful ideas. Before we go any further in our approach to the description of these principles, we believe you are entitled to receive this important suggestion. So here it is. When riches begin to come, they come so quickly in such great abundance that one wonders where they have been hiding all those lean years. It's an astounding statement, and all the more so when we take into consideration the popular belief that riches only come to those who work hard. When you begin to think and grow rich, you will observe that riches begin with a state of mind, with definiteness of purpose, with little to no hard work. You and every other person ought to be interested in knowing how to acquire that state of mind, which will attract riches. I spent 25 years in research analyzing more than 25,000 people because I too wanted to know how wealthy men became that way. Without that research, this book could not have been written. Here, take notice of a very significant truth. The business depression started in 1929 and continued on to an all-time record of destruction until sometime after President Roosevelt entered office. Then the depression began to fade into nothing. Just as an electrician in a theater raises the lights so gradually the darkness is transmuted into light, so did the spell of fear in the minds of people gradually fade away and become faith. Observe very closely. As soon as you master the principles of this philosophy and begin to follow the instructions, your financial status will begin to improve, and everything you touch will begin to transmute into an asset. Impossible? Not at all. One of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average man's familiarity with the word impossible. He knows all the rules which will not work. He knows all the things which cannot be done. This book was written for those who seek the rules which have made others successful, and you are willing to stake everything on those rules. How many of you in this room and YouTube want to know those rules? Put a 1 in the comments. Thank you, Rose. A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing I did was turn to the word impossible and neatly cut it out of the book. That would not be an unwise thing for you to do too. Awesome, Self-Divine. Success comes to those who become success conscious. Failure comes to those who indifferently allow themselves to become failure conscious. The object of this book is to help all who seek it, to learn the art of changing their minds from failure consciousness to success consciousness. Another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own beliefs and impressions. This is why we talk about judgment. When you make a judgment about other people or other things, you're saying, I'm only seeing this from my perspective. And if you do that, then you just cut off a whole abundance of experiences. Okay? Some who will read this will believe that no one can think and grow rich. They cannot think in terms of riches because their thought habits have been steeped in poverty, want, misery, failure, and defeat. These unfortunate people remind me of a prominent Chinese who came to America to be educated in American ways. He attended the University of Chicago. One day, President Harper met this young Oriental on the campus, stopped to chat with him, and asked what had impressed him as being the most noticeable characteristic of the American people. Why, the Chinese man said, the queer slant of your eyes. Your eyes are off slant. What do we say about the Chinese? We refuse to believe that which we do not understand. We foolishly believe that our own limitations are the proper measure of limitations. Sure, the other fellow's eyes are off slant because they are not the same as our own. Millions of people look at the achievements of Henry Ford after he has arrived and envy him because of his good fortune. Perhaps one person in every 100,000 knows the secret of Ford's success, and those who do know are too modest or too reluctant to speak of it because of its simplicity. A single transaction will illustrate the secret perfectly. A few years back, Ford decided to produce his now famous V8 motor. Remember, this book was written in 1937. He chose to build an engine with the entire 8 cylinders cast in one block and instructed his engineers to produce a design for this engine. The design was placed on paper, but the engineers agreed it was simply impossible to cast an 8-cylinder gas engine block in one piece. Ford said, "Do it anyways. But they replied, it's impossible. Go ahead, Ford commanded, and stay on the job until you succeed, no matter how much time is required. The engineers went ahead. There was nothing else for them to do if they want to remain on the Ford staff. 6 months went by, nothing. Another 6 months passed, nothing. The engineers tried every plan to carry out the orders, but everything seemed impossible. At the end of the year, Ford checked with his engineers, and again they informed him they had found no way to carry out his orders. Go right ahead, said Ford. I want it, and I will have it. They went ahead, and then, as if by a stroke of magic, the secret was discovered. The Ford determination had won once more. This story may not be described with accuracy minutely, but the sum and substance of it is correct. Deduce from it, you who wish to think and grow rich, the secret of the Ford millions. If you can, you'll not have to look very far. Henry Ford is a success because he understands and applies the principles of success. One of these is desire, knowing what you want. Remember this Ford story as you read and pick out the lines in which the secret of his stupendous achievement have been described. If you can do this, if you can lay your finger on the particular group of principles which made Henry Ford rich, you can equal his achievements in any calling for which you are suited. Everybody still with me? If you're still in the room, put a 1 in the comments. YouTube, I'm still recording. All right, another story. We're nearly at the end. Don't worry, we only have 2 pages left. You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. Thank you, Self-Divine. When Henley wrote the prophetic lines, I am the master of my fate, the captain of my soul, he should have informed us that we are the masters of our fate, captains of our souls, because we have the power to control our thoughts. He should have told us that the ether in which this little earth floats, in which we move and have our being, is a form of energy moving at a high rate of vibration, and that the ether is filled with a form of universal power which adapts itself to the nature of thoughts we hold in our minds and influences us in natural ways to transmute our thoughts into their physical equivalent. If the poet had told us of this great truth, we would know why it is that we're masters of our fate. He should have told us with great emphasis that this power makes no attempt to discriminate between destructive thoughts and constructive thoughts. So basically what that is saying is the energy of the universe is here to help us create. The energy of the universe can't tell the difference if you are having a negative thought or a positive thought. It's just looking at the intensity of your thought. So what it's saying is you have to learn to have good thoughts because the energy of the universe is always picking up on what you're vibrating at. He should have told us too that our brains become magnetized with the dominant thoughts which we hold in our minds. And by means with which no man is familiar, these magnets attract to us the forces, the people, the circumstances of life which harmonize with the nature of our dominating thoughts. He should have told us that before we can accumulate riches in great abundance, we must magnetize our minds with intense desire for riches, that we must become money conscious until the desire for money drives us to create definite plans for acquiring it. But being a poet and not a philosopher, Henley contented himself by stating a great truth in poetic form. I am the master of my fate, the captain of my soul. Little by little, the truth has unfolded itself until it now appears certain that the principles described hold a secret to mastery over our economic fate. We are now ready to examine the first of these principles. Maintain a spirit of open-mindedness, and remember as you read, they are the invention of not one man. The principles were gathered from the life experiences of more than 500 men who actually accumulated riches in huge amounts, men who began in poverty, with little education, without influence. The principles worked for these men. You can put them to work for your own enduring benefit. You will find it easy, not hard to do. Before you read the next chapter, I want you to know that it contains factual information which might easily change your entire financial destiny, as it has so definitely brought changes of stupendous proportions to two people described. I want you to know also that the relationship between these two men and myself is such that I could have taken no liberties with the facts, even if I had wished to do so. One of them has been my close personal friend for almost 25 years. The other is my own son. The unusual success of these two men, success which they generously accredit to the principles described, more than justifies this personal reference as a means of emphasizing the far-flung power of this principle. Almost 15 years ago, I delivered the commencement speech at Salem College, West Virginia. I emphasized the principle described with so much intensity that one of the members of the graduating class definitely appropriated it and made it a part of his own philosophy. The young man is now a member of Congress. Just before this book went to publisher, he wrote me a letter stating his opinion of the principle outlined in the next chapter. The letter reads, "My dear Napoleon Hill, my service as a member of Congress having given me an insight into the problems of men and women, I am writing to offer a suggestion which may become helpful to thousands of worthy people. With apologies, I must state that the suggestion, if acted upon, will mean several years of labor for you. But I'm enheartened to make the suggestion because I know your great love for rendering useful service. In 1922, you delivered the commencement address at Salem College when I was a member of the graduating class. In that address, you planted in my mind an idea which has been responsible for the opportunity I now have to serve the people of my state, and will be responsible in a very large measure to whatever success I have in the future. The suggestion I have in mind is that you put into a book the sum and substance of the address you delivered at Salem College, and give the people of America an opportunity to profit by your many years of experience and association with the men who in their greatness have made America the richest nation on earth. I recall as though it were yesterday the description you gave of the method by which Henry Ford, with but little schooling, without a dollar, and no influential friends, rose to great heights. I made up my mind then, even before you had finished your speech, that I would make a place for myself no matter how many difficulties I had to surmount. Thousands of young people will finish their schooling this year, and within the next few years, every one of them will be seeking just such a message of encouragement. They will want to know where to turn, what to do, and how to get started in life. You can tell them because you have helped to solve the problems of many people. If there is any possible way that you can afford to render so great a service, may I offer the suggestion that you include with every book one of your personal analysis charts, that the purchaser of the book may have the benefit of a complete self-inventory, indicating, as you indicated to me years ago, exactly what is standing in their way of success. You know the problems of those who face the necessity of beginning all over again. There are thousands of people in America today who would like to know how they can convert ideas into money, people who must start at scratch without finances and recoup their losses. If anyone can help, you can. If you publish the book, I would like to own the first copy that comes from the press, autographed by you. With best wishes, Jennings Randolph. That is the end of chapter 1 of Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. So I'm going to stop my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed this reading. And